Hey, it's Jeremy Silva with BuildASoil. I'm doing a short video, well, probably not going to be too short, but I'm going to do a video with you today on making a potting soil from scratch from your home. And the way that we're going to do it is show you some data, and I'll hold this up and I'll kind of zoom in, at least get closer. So here are 10 different recipes that we sent to the Logan Labs on July 3rd, it looks like, 2018. And what we did is we took different percentages of Peatmoss, Pumice, Ole Mountain fish compost, and a local Montrose topsoil. We have test data on every individual ingredient, but we also want to test how they combine together as a base. And so what I'm going to do is right now on camera tell you the generic recipe we've all been given and loosely followed, and then I'm going to show you the test results on how these percentages played out. We're going to pick one that looks pretty good, and we're going to embellish a little bit by adding a couple of organic soil amendments, and I'm going to make the potting soil right here. I'm only going to make about 10 gallons because that's all I need. The reason why I'm making the soil is because I'm going to start these compound genetics, and we're going to do an Instagram and YouTube videos showing these two tents with different grow lights growing the same seeds. It's the Marshmallow OG, Chemdog D, Triangle Kush, and Jet Fuel Gelato, and there's 13 seeds in here. I'm going to do half gallon starts. Since they're feminized, I'm just going to start in a half gallon of soil, which means that I need, 7-10 gallons of soil to have way more than enough for what I've got going on. So that's what I'm going to do today. To start off, I'm going to go ahead and soak these seeds since I'm going to want to plant tomorrow. I like to soak my seeds anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. What time is it? I think it's afternoon, 2, 3 o'clock right now?
3 o'clock.
3 o'clock? Okay. So if I did 12 hours, that's at 3 o'clock in the morning? And so I'm probably just going to soak a little bit longer. Up to 24 hours is probably the maximum. I've soaked seeds for 48 hours or longer and they still turn out okay, but I don't think it's ideal. We want to keep these seeds running the whole way. So as soon as they get enough water to soak up the seed, and now we're not going to risk it accidentally drying out in the soil, we'll be good to go. What I'm going to do to actually enhance the seeds, which you probably don't need to, these are freshly made seeds, but I just love using aloe. It really does help. This is what our new label looks like for our aloe vera product. Pretty soon we're going to have it on the packaging and go over the directions. But let me just open this product right now. And this is about a teaspoon per gallon, or just a little bit less than that is kind of the ideal use, and those directions are on here. So I'm just going to do this. It does say to wear gloves and use a mask. I don't really pay attention to that when I'm doing small amounts, but if you're sensitive, you might want to follow that protocol as on the directions. So let's see, where are the teaspoons? Here we go. All right, so there's a teaspoon. You can use just a little teaspoon from your baking drawer, or whatever you want to use. I happen to have these here. I've now got a gallon of water that I'm going to use to wet this soil once I make it. And so what I'm going to do is take some of this for now so that I can make a gallon instead of just a shot glass worth. So I'll mix this up. Normally I have like a bamboo stick or something. Let me see if I can find it and I'll be right back. There it is. All right, so bamboo stick. This stuff, if you just let it sit for a few minutes, it mixes in a lot easier. And the other way to do it is if you're going to be spraying your plants, or if you're going to be watering the plants, you can mix a little bit of this yucca extract in there. And it definitely makes anything stay in suspension a little bit better, and it helps moisten the soil. I'm going to do that, but I don't want to soak my seeds in the Thermex, which is our yucca. So I'm going to do this right before I moisten the soil, and I'm going to stick to the aloe for now. So if you look in here, you can see that it's starting to get a little bit more golden in color, like the aloe vera, and it's starting to foam up. That's because there's some saponin in the aloe vera. If I let this sit for a few minutes, it's totally going to dissolve. What I'm going to do right now is steal a little bit of this, so you can zoom back out, and I'm going to take some water right here. In fact, I'll probably just use a shot glass. There's what it looks like. I'm going to go ahead and pop my seeds in here, and we're going to soak those until tomorrow, and then we'll be ready to go. So I'm going to pop open the seeds, dump them in. There we go. Those will be ready for tomorrow. Normally what I do is I just cover that in foil and I kind of write on there with a Sharpie what they are. I'll open my kitchen cabinet and I'll just set it in there somewhere dark where it's out of the way so I don't forget about it. For here, I'm probably just going to put this on my desk and cover it so it doesn't get spilt or anything like that. And I'll go over that tomorrow. All right, on to the soil recipe, the important part. Obviously, you know how to soak seeds, but that's the way I like to do it. So now I've got about a gallon of water. I'm going to make about 10 gallons of soil. I planned that. When I'm done, I want to water at about 10% by volume, which is 1 gallon of water for 10 gallons of soil. because it's fairly dry to start. And the reason why is I'm using all base ingredients. So for right now, if we go look at these ingredients, or these recipes, I'm just gonna sit down and you can come closer. So you can see recipe 1 uses 30% sphagnum peat moss, and then all the way down at the bottom up to 70%. And then different variants of pumice, of compost, and of topsoil. If you look at these recipe 1, the cation exchange is, acceptable. These are 2 different tests. Mainly this alkaline test is to determine the calcium difference and the difference in cation exchange, because not all the calcium gets adsorbed into the soil right away, and it kind of tricks us on the soil test. I could do a whole video on just that, but you can see the pH is a little high at 8.1. Main reason is our topsoil that we use at 15% in that recipe is very alkaline. It's over 8, and it's a high calcium product as far as the topsoil goes. Your topsoil might be different, okay? So I have the test results on that topsoil so you can compare. Now, if we look through and you look at the rest of the numbers, you can see the phosphorus. There's no amendments in here, so this is just all from compost and soil and peat moss. The phosphorus to potassium is kind of inverted. You can see here on availability, we've got calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, all pretty much in line here. However, the pH is just a little high, and so we want to work on these percentages a little bit. The rest, as far as micronutrients goes, we can always work on after. This is just testing the base. All right, so now let's go down a little bit. There's recipe 2, similar pH. I want to go through all of them, so I'm going to go a little quicker, but you can see as we get to higher amounts of peat moss and lower amounts of topsoil, the pH starts to drop. Okay, so what I'm going to do is fast forward ahead into these recipes and get a little bit further down the line. So here's the last one. Let me see where that's at. Number 10, and that's a 6.2 pH. And so you can see the exchange capacity is a little lower, so this won't hold a lot of nutrients, but it's got a pretty nice pH. And then as you look down here, what's not available as much, which makes sense, is that calcium. Now, there is more in the alkaline test as far as percentage, so somewhere in here is where the truth lies, and we can do the math on that. But when you break it all down, we're getting a little bit closer. Let's back it up and look at recipe 8 and 9. So let's see, recipe 9, 6.6 pH. And we can see calcium a little bit better based on the percentage of topsoil going up. And then the magnesium's still a little high. Okay, so let's go down and let's look at the recipe number 8. Recipe number 8, bam, 6.0 pH. That looks pretty good. Going down here, calcium availability is low. So we can obviously add calcium to that. I really like the starting pH. So this is a recipe we could play with. Let's see. All of them would be workable realistically, especially once we get biology and we add amendments, but it's fun to test and see where you're starting at based on the ingredients. Recipe 8 was 60% peat moss, 30% pumice, 7% Ollie Mountain compost, and 3% of our topsoil. And, when I ran nitrogen numbers and a few other things on some of these tests in the past, they were already pretty high without adding much. So you'd be surprised how far a really base mix like this will go, but then we can add in some amendments. So instead of me going off the deep end on soil testing, I'm just gonna pick a recipe that has kind of a neutral pH to start with, and we're gonna build this one right now. If you wanted to follow different percentages, you can just start with parts. Since I'm making 10 gallons, I'm gonna call each part 10% or 1 gallon. So if I need 60%, that's gonna be 6 gallons. 30% is gonna be 3 gallons, and when I'm done, I should be left with 10 gallons, and that'll be more than enough for me. So let's go back out. I'm gonna put these soil tests away, and I'm gonna start making the recipe right now. So the first thing that I like to add is the Canadian Sphagnum peat moss. This is from Premier. It's been open in the shop here since I did some previous testing, so it's lost a little bit of its moisture. But what I'm gonna do is just start dumping this in my bucket. And this bucket, which we offer, is one of the measuring ones that you can see through. So I'm gonna go to a gallon as one, but since we need 6 gallons of this material fluffed up to get to 60% on here for recipe 8, I'm gonna go ahead and probably fill it to 3 and do that twice. That way I'm accurate. And I'm trying not to take big chunks because that's a lot more volume. It's compressed. So as I get it, I'm gonna make sure that I run it through my hands like this and make sure that it all fluffs up, okay? So I'll take this chunk, I'll put it in, and I'll make sure that I break it up. Now there's a little bit of moisture as we get deeper in here, so it should keep the dust down. But you definitely don't want to leave these chunks like that because it's going to affect your volume and the moisture and everything else. Now, when we make potting soil here, we do a really good job of getting these clumps out. We have machinery that helps. but it's not as good as you putting your hands into it, putting your love into it, and breaking every single clump and inspecting every part of the soil as you make it. That's the homemade difference. I don't care who you are. BuildASoil can't keep up with that. No company can, and I'd like to say that I could, and it's damn close, but homemade will always trump that. Just like homemade meal will probably always trump, something bought at the store. Now, there's some good restaurants out there, don't get me wrong, but when you serve hundreds of people, there's gotta be some variety. And when you're 100% in control of that, you usually receive the benefits. So, I'm breaking this up. Let me add some more. Hopefully I can do a little editing on the video and we can speed this process up, but whatever. Worst case, hang out with me. We're gonna make some soil. A lot of people, if you've got sensitive lungs, you're gonna wanna wear a respirator or a dust mask. Obviously, I probably should be too, but this is falling straight down. We're not doing a lot today, and well, I'm risking it. It's kind of how I roll, so maybe you wanna do a little differently. Our guys here, when they make this, they have full respirators and masks and everything that we wear. We have ventilation systems because when you do something every day, it's a world of difference, and even a little bit can affect you. So going through, breaking up clumps. The other thing I can do is once I get it pretty close, I'm gonna dump this into my bucket here for mixing, so I can kind of double check all these little clumps and make sure that I've got them all. But at least close enough for the volume is what I'm hoping to get today. So it's almost to the 3. I'm gonna go ahead and get just a little bit more in there and make sure that I've got the numbers where I want them to be. All right, you can see that it's about at 3 gallons, and that's what I want. Here's the line. So I'm gonna dump that in, and I'm gonna do one more. And then we'll make sure that I break up all the clods in here before we get to that last step. And then really, even if you add the extra ingredients, when it's all mixed at the end, you're gonna wanna mix moisture through, and you'll have another shot to break up all the clumps. If you're doing this on the tarp, you can use a shovel, your feet, all sorts of stuff to break up these clumps and make your job a little bit easier. All right? Obviously, if I was making a lot, I would just rip open this whole container of peat moss instead of doing a little at a time. But like I mentioned, we're just making 10 gallons, and it's pretty easy to dose out that way and keep accurate. So just breaking up these clumps. Your peat moss will probably be unopened and a little bit more moist, depending on where you get it from. And this might go a little bit faster for you. Breaking everything up, making sure it looks good. All right. So this is a lot of peat moss. Peat moss is pretty acidic, and that's part of why the pH dropped on there. But it's also got a great texture. There's a lot of arguments about peat moss as far as sustainability. If you research where we get our peat moss from in Canada, they've used less than 1% of what's available over decades of gardening, and it's very tightly controlled. We've got some peat substitutes that we'll be using, one called Peatmoss, but for now, we're making the standard recipes that we're all familiar with that work very, very well. And then we'll play with the alternative recipes and share some of that document with you, or that information, as we send those peat-free soils to the lab. But for now, there's another 3 gallons. Let me make sure I get all the way up to that line. I want to make sure I'm accurate here. Okay, looks pretty good. Now, obviously I can compress this, and so I just like to do it like a fluffed volume so that I'm measuring the same way all the time, because it'll compress down if you really put your hands on it. All right, there we go. Most of the clumps are out now, so I'm pretty comfortable going to the next step. And then, like I said, as we add the moisture and everything else, I'll go through here with my hands again and make sure that that is completely broken down. There's my bucket. Let's go to the next one. Pumice. For recipe number 8, it says 30%, 3 gallons. I got a bag of pumice here. We get it straight from the mine. And it's a pretty good size for what we're doing. I may not have had enough, but this bag was just sitting here. So I think I got another bag somewhere where I can add. Let me look. You know what? Normally I just use pumice, and that's great, but if you've got the chance to get Growstone, we offer it. Got a bag here. I'm going to go ahead and put some of that in. We actually offer the Growstone GS2. We just got a truckload of it in, and we're probably going to start using that in our recipes. So it's a little smaller than this, but this is a recycled glass, and it's slightly larger than the pumice that we use. We have a smaller version of this we're going to start using for everything, but it's very effective at holding air as opposed to just draining. This holds some air, but it's more of a drainage They both hold microbes well, but this recycled glass is a killer product. So I'm gonna dump that in as a part of my recipe. Why not? I love this stuff. It really does work well. And we're trying to get to that 3 gallon mark on here. So a little bit more. Okay. There we go, 3 gallons, okay? So now, we're almost there. See some dust from all that pumice. Wetting that down will stop a lot of that dust, from even occurring. Okay, so let's see. I did the 30% pumice. Now we're on to 7% Barley Mountain compost and 3% topsoil. So what I'm gonna do is combine these two to get to that 1 gallon or 10%. So let's start with 7% or just under 3/4 of a gallon of your compost. Now, the Oldie Mountain Fish compost, it's got a great neutral pH. It's got a good balance of NPK, and it's dark, black, and rich, and it's a lot of high percentage of worm castings in here. And so the reason why we use it is it's very duplicatably consistent for us. If you've got a local compost resource, send it off to the lab and see where it's at. But if your confidence good, you can probably follow similar percentages as this recipe because we're only using 7%. That's a great amount, and it's not going to overdo the recipe of the soil, which means it's going to be more like a high bricks recipe. Not as much nitrogen, more micronutrient, trace mineral density. So let me go ahead and do this, and hopefully this is close to 3/4 of a gallon. I think there's a gallon or 2 in here. All right, so that's pretty good. Obviously I don't want to, yep, that was a little too much. Wasn't really paying attention. But whatever, this is how it goes at home too. Obviously I have to sweep after it. All right, that's a little closer to 3/4 of a gallon. A little bit better. All right. Dang mess. Let's see where we're at. Okay, that's less than a gallon. There's the 3 mark as far as quarts. So we're very close to the 3/4 of a gallon there. And then as far as the topsoil, 3%. So this will get us to the 1 gallon number, and then we'll be good. Don't want to overdo it because I can't take it back out so easy. Where is it? Gallon. So now I'm to the 1 gallon mark. That looks about right. Okay, now there's a couple rocks in here, and I like having a couple rocks in my soil, this topsoil, everything, so it becomes like a real soil instead of a completely homogenized potting soil. All right, so now I can mix this together in here a little bit. Looks beautiful. Go ahead and dump that in here. Obviously a slightly bigger bucket would be a little easier to work with. You can dump it out on a tarp. There's a lot of ways to go. Okay, that pretty much covers everything for the recipe. Those are the numbers that you saw the recipe on as far as the test results. Now, because I know that the calcium and the NPK and stuff aren't 100% ideal and they're gonna need a little more food, what I wanna do is add a few extras. So, I've got some Big 6, which is humic acid and 6 micronutrients. I'm gonna go ahead and add a small amount of this in there. Okay, it's like a teaspoon per gallon. I'm gonna send some numbers off to the lab and share with you what we find, but I'm gonna add 2 teaspoons to this 10 gallons of soil, and then I'll probably get some scaled numbers and share with you, but this is just a little bit extra. You can always water that in later, okay? Hopefully the humic acid will help pull it all together. I've also got Cracklin. This is a really well-rounded, it's got, I think, 13 different ingredients that we carry at BuildASoil. The list of ingredients, pretty extensive, but we get such good reviews on this product because it's got everything that we carry here in one bag. I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle this in, and since it's more than a cubic foot, normally I do like a 1/2 cup to 1.5 cups per cubic foot. I'm probably gonna put a couple cups in here, since this is 10 gallons, and that'll be a little on the high side, but a lot of this is rock dust and minerals, so it's not all just NPK, soil amendment type stuff. It's got some malted barley. All right, so let's see, ounces. We're at 12 ounces. I wanted to put 16, so I'll do 4 more. That'll be that 2 cups that I talked about, for 10 gallons. Dang, 4 ounces on the money. All right, cool. So now I've got the extras. I've got all of the food, so to speak, built in. I added a little humic acid with the trace elements, micronutrients. Now, this is a silica product made from rice hulls by Growstone. And you can water this in later. You don't have to add it now, but I mean, might as well just add a little, get a little extra silica in there. Some of it will be in the topsoil already. The other products that I have that are kind of interesting to play with, a lot of people add biochar. This biochar has already been inoculated with Rootwise. And since I'm just making a potting soil at home, a lot of you guys will have some stuff laying around or might want to get the extras. I don't want to go above 3 to 5% with this product, and I like to usually stay a little lower percentage. And so obviously 1 gallon would be 10%. A cup would be a 16th of that. So I'm not adding much. I'm going to go ahead and just add a cup of this in here. A little more. So this is going to hopefully increase the cation exchange capacity, and that will allow, so there's a cup, and that will allow it to hold some more of these nutrients without them being too much for the soil to hold. Then it'll slow release back to the plant, and it should allow it to be balanced. Now the other product that I've got here is a premium montmorillonite clay, a calcium bentonite, calcium montmorillonite. We offer this on BuildASoil, and what this does is it's got a very high cation exchange, again allowing it to hold on to more nutrients, but it's also going to increase the water holding capacity so that it doesn't just run out with all that peat moss and aeration in there. The peat will hold the water, but at the end of the day, this will help just a little bit holding on to nutrients and making the texture really nice. So instead of adding a cup, I'm probably just going to do a smaller amount. Let's say like a half cup of this, and we'll go from there. So cups, a little more to be a half cup. There's a half cup. Okay. I think that's a pretty good soil recipe. Now, you'll notice this isn't our exact formula. The recipe that we'd always been taught in the beginning was 1/3 part, or I'm sorry, 3 ingredients. Okay, 1/3 each. So 1 part peat moss, 1 part pumice or any aeration that you have, and another part compost. We found that most compost used at that high of a percentage was more problematic than helpful, so we've been adjusting some of our recipes. This Ollie Mountain does work really well in a high percentage, but you've got to do some other work to balance the rest. That's why we have soil building kits. This light recipe will work for almost anybody, and then you could always add compost teas, top dressing, all sorts of stuff to it. This is a minimalist approach, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix this together a little bit before I add my aloe water. So I'm just going to dig my hands in here, start getting that peat moss worked up in through the aeration. Obviously, I've got to be a little careful so I don't spill it, where normally, if this was on a big container, I could just kind of whip it around. You could put it in a big bag and shake it up, and there's so many ways depending on how much volume you're making. But the idea is just to get it integrated, kind of like you're baking cookies or making something in the kitchen. It really is plant food, so you want to get it all mixed up nice. All right, now it's not mixed up yet enough, but I'm going to start integrating a little bit of moisture now that I've got it flipped up at least a little bit. Okay, you can see that aloe's fully dissolved because I let it sit in there a little bit like I mentioned. And normally what you could do is like take your sprayer and gently sprinkle it. And that's great if you've got a big pile, but if you're gonna be able to work all of it by hand, you can just pour it in there. Since I've done this before, I know that 10% or 1 gallon to 10 gallons is a great number. It's not gonna be overwatered. And since I've got it in a bucket, this peat is kind of dry. And normally it's a little hydrophobic. And normally I would add that yucca in there to help break that. I can do that on the next watering since I forgot to dump it in. As long as I work this by hand and force all the moisture to be even, it's gonna be really nice. It's gonna break that hydrophobic tension of the peat moss. It'll make it so that it starts absorbing water instead of repelling the water. And at that point, it's gonna be easy to work with. Now, I'll let this sit overnight and come together. You could let it sit a couple of weeks or much longer if you wanted to. But I'm gonna use it tomorrow to put my seeds in. So I'm just gonna let the moisture kind of evenly come together all overnight. In fact, I'll probably add more moisture, but this will be enough to get it started. So here we go, starting to change color. Moisture starting to come together. You can see the dry spots versus the wet spots and how they're starting to clump together, like making a texture. It's It's really nice. The smells are coming together. It's starting to be like an actual recipe instead of just ingredients. All right. Get it all mixed up. And then what I'll do is probably mix it one more time tomorrow before I plant up, just to make sure that everything came together. I wasn't kind of rushed on the video, trying to speed things up too much. So I'll definitely go through this and double check it all. But even in too small of a container, mixing it with what I had here, this is gonna be fine. It's all starting to come together really nice. You can wear gloves if you want. This stuff's pretty easy on my hands, so I'm not particularly worried about it. Everybody's different. All right. This is starting to look really good. You can see it looks like a potting soil now. It's got a little bit of texture, a little bit of moisture. It's got compost, peat moss, topsoil, all the stuff that we like to use. The plants are gonna love it. So I'll let this all come together. And what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start a video tomorrow. Hopefully I can upload it in a series so that we can watch along. But at minimum, I'll update you on Instagram. And I'm going to put all of this soil into these half-gallon bags. I'm gonna take these seeds that we've germinated, and by that time tomorrow, those will be sunk to the bottom. And we're gonna put them in there. I'll put the mulch together, and we're gonna put them in these grow tents. We're gonna turn the lights on, and we're gonna see how many of these germinate. Then I'm gonna pick our favorite 4, and I'm gonna do 30-gallon containers, 2 in each tent. And we're gonna do an entire demo. And then what I think is I'm gonna take some of these home, and I'm gonna run the new LED quantum boards from timber instead of the cobs and the CMH cob like you'll see in the next video. And I'm gonna do a 3-way test. Now I know it's not from clone, but I think we're gonna get some really good information just testing the lights with the meters, testing the soil, showing how the seeds grow throughout the process. So if you've got any questions, go ahead and leave them here on this video. You can email support@buildasoil.com and we'll be happy to answer them. Hopefully I didn't skip over anything today. I tried to be pretty detailed. And then I'm gonna hopefully put all these soil tests together so you can kind of see how the recipes correlate as far as a base level of recipe without any ingredients added. And then maybe if I've got time, I'll send some of this off to the lab so you can see what it looks like with these exact ingredients that I put together. Anyways, stay loyal to the soil and check out BuildASoil.com.